I had driven that road 100 times before, but never had it felt so quiet. The highway between Alta and Tromsø can be beautiful in the winter, the kind of beauty that makes you feel small, as if nature itself is watching you. That night, the snow was falling in slow motion, illuminated by my headlights like white dust floating in the air. It was well past midnight, and the temperature had dropped below -15. The world outside my windshield looked almost unreal, empty, endless, and pure. I was returning home from visiting an old friend who lived near Hammerfest. My wife had gone to bed hours earlier, and I remember thinking I should have stayed the night instead of driving back, but I've always preferred solitude, especially on those northern roads. There's a strange peace in that silence, a peace that can also feel like loneliness if you stare at it too long. Then, around a sharp turn, I saw it. At first, I thought it was an animal, a reindeer maybe, standing still on the shoulder of the road, but as I slowed down, the shape became clearer. It was a man, or at least, it looked like one. He stood completely motionless, facing the oncoming lights, his body outlined by the snow swirling around him. What struck me first was his clothing, a metallic, silvery suit that shimmered faintly even without light. No hat, no gloves, no sign of cold. Just standing there, as if waiting. I rolled the window down halfway. "Are you all right?" I asked in Norwegian. The man turned his head slowly toward me. His eyes reflected the headlights in a strange way. Not like human eyes. There was no red reflection, no shadow. Just a pale glow, as if the color itself had been drained out of them. He didn't answer. I hesitated, torn between fear and concern. You don't survive long in the Arctic by ignoring someone freezing on the road, but there was something about him that made my instincts scream, "Don't." Then he spoke. "Thank you for stopping," he said softly, in perfect Norwegian, though his accent was strange, almost melodic. "I need to go south." His voice didn't match his face. It was calm, but there was no visible movement in his lips when he spoke. The sound seemed to appear directly in the air between us. I told him I was going to Tromsø, and he nodded. "That will do," he said, opening the door and sitting beside me like someone who'd done it 1,000 times. I could smell no snow, no cold on him. Nothing. His presence filled the car with a quiet tension, as if every sound, the heater, the tires, even my own heartbeat, had been turned down to a whisper. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. The headlights carved a narrow path through the falling snow. I could feel his gaze on me, calm and unblinking. Something about it made me think of a child seeing the world for the first time, mixed with the weight of someone ancient. Finally, I asked, "Where are you coming from?" He looked ahead and said, "From far above this sky." I thought it was a joke, maybe a lost tourist or a man escaping some mental hospital. God knows I've met stranger people in the north, but before I could laugh or reply, he touched the dashboard with his fingers. The car's lights flickered once, then everything went dark. The speedometer, the radio, the cabin light, but the engine kept running smoothly. I froze, my hands gripping the steering wheel. He turned to me and said quietly, "Do not be afraid. The energy that moves your machine comes from the same source that moves you. You just don't remember." And then he smiled. It was the kind of smile that made my skin crawl and my heart slow down at the same time, not threatening, but impossibly calm, like he understood everything I'd ever feared. Outside, the snow kept falling, but it no longer looked white. It looked blue, reflecting a light that wasn't there before. That was the moment I realized I wasn't driving alone anymore. Something else had entered my world, something that shouldn't exist, yet somehow did. He didn't look at me when he spoke again. He watched the road as if the falling snow was speaking some language he was translating in his head. "You asked where I came from," he said. You will understand better if we speak of where everything comes from. I let out a short breath I hadn't noticed I was holding. I'm just trying to get home, I said, half joking, half pleading with the world to turn ordinary again. That is precisely what all beings are trying to do, he replied. To get home. The heater hummed softly. Beyond the glass, the tundra rose and fell like dark waves under the blanket of white. The faint ribbon of aurora on the horizon pulsed like a sleeping heartbeat. I kept driving. What do you call it? I asked. Home. He considered the word. Where I'm from, we don't use a name. Names create distance, but you would call it the source. The source of God? I said, immediately regretting how clumsy it sounded. His head tilted, an almost human gesture. You separate the word from what the word points to. In that separation you argue, doubt, and build temples to protect your argument. Where I am from, we share the experience and have no need to defend it. I wanted to say something clever, but nothing came. Instead, I noticed the strangest detail, his breath. In that cold, mine left pale ghosts on every exhale. His breath left nothing at all. How do you know any of this? I asked. Because where I live, the boundary between what you call inside and outside is thinner. We perceive the same movement running through thought, matter, and time. In your world, you mistrust this recognition. You call it faith and set it against reason, as if two eyes looking at the same horizon were enemies. He reached toward the glove compartment, but didn't touch it. The latch slid open on its own, and the small flashlight I keep there rolled forward. He glanced at it, not with pride, not with showmanship, with the kind of attention you give to a sleeping child. You think I am performing tricks, he said softly, as if reading the stubborn corners of my mind. I am only aligning with what is already holding you together. Then prove it, I whispered before I could stop myself. Prove God. Prove the source. He turned, finally meeting my eyes. Up close, his irises looked like shallow water over sand, clear, patterned, endlessly still. Proving is what you ask for when you are afraid to recognize, he said. Recognition is immediate. Proof is a ceremony you perform for your fear. I stared at the road. It narrowed to a tunnel of light, then opened again into a curve that always ices over in January. My tires should have slipped, they always do there, but they didn't. The car floated over the bend, like the ice had gripped us in a gentle hand. What do you want from me? I asked. Nothing. He answered as if that were the simplest truth in the world. I want something for you to remember. He lifted his right hand, palm up, as if catching snow. For a second, I thought the flakes were avoiding him. Then I realized they were slowing down above his skin, not stopping, but descending like feathers through warm air. Each flake held its shape longer than it should have, crystalline, precise, almost luminous. Everything you see is a song, he said. Matter is music standing still. When you pray, you try to sing the melody back. Sometimes you match the tone. Most times you only make noise and call it suffering. I laughed, an embarrassed sound that surprised me. So we're out of tune. You are learning, he said without judgment. Children press many keys before the first chord. We passed a frozen inlet where the sea meets the land like glass poured across stone. I always slow down there. That night I pulled over. The engine idled. The snow fell with a quieter sound than silence. I turned to him. Why tell me? I asked. Why tonight? He looked out through the windshield as if the answer were written on the sky. Because your grief has ripened. I felt the words hit a place I keep hidden even from myself. My son's name came to my throat and stayed there. He had died 2 winters earlier, a thin blue morning in a hospital that smelled of bleach and apology. I hadn't said his name aloud in months. How do you know about... He raised a hand, not to silence me, but to soften the moment. Loss is the strongest instrument, he said. It can be noise that breaks you, or a string that, when tuned, carries you back to the source. You have been holding it by the wrong end. I closed my eyes. The heater clicked. Somewhere in the distance, a plough moaned its way along another road, another life. What is God, then? I asked, the question honest for the first time. Not the word, the thing itself. He answered without pause, not as doctrine, but like a memory he loved, the quiet that moves. I opened my eyes to protest, to say it was too poetic, too vague. But he continued, when you love without asking, you feel it. When you forgive a debt no one can repay, you feel it. When you see beauty that is not useful, and still you stop to look, you feel it. The same current runs through your atoms and the stars. You cannot be apart from it. You can only be unaware. And you, I said, are you apart from it? He smiled again, and for the first time it felt human. No. But I forget too. I come here to remember in contrast. We sat like that for a while. Two figures in a small car on a dark road, listening to the engine's steady breathing and the soft hiss of snow against glass. Finally he said, "Drive." I put the car in gear. As we pulled back onto the highway, the aurora widened above us, a green veil opening. It was subtle, like a curtain being drawn by a careful hand. I'd seen countless auroras in my life. None had ever felt like an answer. The road unspooled like a dark ribbon laid across the white. I kept my speed steady, careful on the long straight where the wind sometimes carves drifts across both lanes. The aurora held, faint and wide, almost colorless at first, and then gently green. Not dramatic like in postcards, but soft, like a breath you only notice when it stops. He watched it the way sailors watch tide. "You called it the source," I said. "If it's everywhere, how did we lose it?" "You didn't lose it," he said. "You covered it." "Covered it with what?" "With brilliance." He turned to me with that still, shallow water gaze. "You are an intelligent species. Intelligence is a beautiful knife. You can use it to shape bread or to cut your own mouth." I waited. "Your great sin on earth," he continued, "is not war nor greed, though both are symptoms. It is the arrogance of separation, the certainty that what you can measure is all that exists, and that what you can't measure must wait outside like a beggar." I almost laughed. "We've learned to mistrust stories," I said. "Stories gave us witch trials and charlatans and kings who claimed the right to rule by a sky they couldn't show us." "And so you built a new temple," he said gently. "One of instruments and proofs. We admire it. We used it too in our time. But then you made a mistake we also made. You mistook the instrument for the music." The snow hissed under the tires. A pair of headlights appeared far behind and then vanished in a sweeping turn. For a moment, I felt less alone, and then even more. "Arrogance is not loud at first," he went on. "It starts as self-defense. You are hurt by superstition, so you throw out the unseen. You are deceived by priests, so you deny the altar. You are frightened by silence, so you fill it with noise and call the noise truth. Slowly, what is obvious to the body, the quiet that moves through all things, becomes embarrassing. You use words like subjective, unreliable, unscientific. Soon, you have a world lit by bright lamps, but you cannot sleep." I glanced at him. "People still pray," I said. "Churches are full in some places." He nodded. "And yet many pray to their own reflection. They ask the sky to feed the hunger of the name they wear, not the life beneath the name. That is also separation." "So what do we do?" I asked. "Throw away the lamps?" "No," he said, and his voice warmed. "Let them shine, but open the window." He tapped the dashboard softly, a gesture as light as a moth. The radio clicked on by itself, but there was no station, only a thready wash of static. He touched it again, and the static narrowed. That is the only way I can describe it. The noise gathered into a tone, not a melody, not anything I could hum, but a single clean thread that ran through the hiss. "We watch you from time to time," he said. "We do not intervene because intervention is only another form of noise. But we listen, and sometimes the tone is strong. In a monastery where the cook peels potatoes for love of the brothers, in a laboratory where a woman forgets her name for a moment and seeks truth with her whole body, in a nurse's hands at 4 in the morning, in a father forgiving a son he will bury at noon." My hands tightened on the wheel. He had chosen his examples carefully. Or maybe there was no choice. Maybe the tone in me answered the tone in his words. "You think God wants worship," he said. "We have found that the source only wants to be recognized, which is to say it wants nothing. Wanting ends where recognition begins. You are closest to it when you don't look for advantage in your closeness." I thought of the years after my boy died, how I had bargained with a ceiling, take the years left to me and give them to him. How angry I became that the bargain was ignored. I had called that anger honesty. Maybe it was only another way to keep the window closed. "You said you made our mistake," I said. "What changed you?" "We broke," he answered simply. "We exhausted ourselves building towers of proof until the light between the stones was gone. Our children slept with lamps on and feared the dark that keeps seeds alive. When the towers cracked, we heard a sound in the ruin. It was the tone beneath the noise, patient as winter. We followed it back." He folded his hands, still and almost humble. "It took us a long time to learn that the sky answers best when you stop shouting." We passed a lay-by where truckers sometimes park to rest. Empty tonight. The plow's trail ended there. Ahead, the road looked softer. I slowed. "Why bring this to me?" I asked. "I'm not a priest, I'm not a scientist. I'm a man who installs second-hand boilers and fixes gutters before the thaw." "That is why," he said. "You know the honesty of things that must work by morning. The world is repaired by such hands." "I don't feel holy," I said. "Holiness is not a feeling," he said. "It is the absence of pretense in the presence of the real." The green above us grew more certain, the way a whisper becomes a voice when the room finally quiets. I rolled the window down. The air cut my lungs, clean as a blade. Somewhere in that cold, I thought I heard it, not with my ears, but with the part of me that dreams without pictures. A steady note, thin and bright, threaded through the wind. He turned to me and for the first time asked something. "Will you try?" he said. "To do what?" "To doubt your doubt long enough to hear." I nodded before I could argue with myself. "I'll try." "Good," he said. "Now we can speak of what comes next." We drove until the road narrowed into a stretch that always feels forgotten by the men who lay salt. The snow here stacks thicker, and the wind arranges it into small, cruel sculptures that can pull a car sideways if you're careless. I wasn't careless. My hands were steady. My mind wasn't. "Pull over," he said quietly. There was no shoulder to speak of, just a small widening where a service track met the highway. I eased the car in, front tires crunching over a ridge of plow snow. The engine idled. The heater sighed. The world felt held between breaths. He opened the door and stepped out without bracing against the cold. I hesitated, grabbed my wool cap and gloves, and followed. The air hit with a clean medicinal pain that wakes every nerve at once. Snow pattered against my jacket like sand. Above us, the aurora was a soft veil, nothing touristic, just a pale band, like a memory of green. "Look up," he said. I did what I always do first in winter. I scanned for weather, not wonder. Cloud thickness, wind direction, the faint halo around the moon that means more snow is coming, old habits. He said nothing. He just stood with his hands at his sides, face lifted, as if he were listening to a familiar hymn that only now returned to him. "What am I looking for?" I asked. "For the pattern you forgot," he said. "We call it remembrance. It is not for me to make. It is for you to notice." He lifted one hand, palm open, not a magician's flourish, more the way you would show a skittish animal you are empty-handed. The aurora did not swell, no trumpets of color, no curtains torn wide. Instead, the faint green thinned and organized itself the way a flock sometimes does when it stops being a confusion of wings and becomes a single shape. At first I thought I was imposing it, a cross, a wheel, a rune I wanted to see, but it wasn't any of those. It was simpler and stranger, a set of concentric ovals, like ripples from a stone dropped into a dark lake, each ring precise, the space between them equal, the whole thing breathing. The snow around us quieted in my ears, not because it stopped falling, but because something else moved closer. "Do you see it?" he asked. "I think so," I said, embarrassed by how inadequate the words sounded. "Rings." He almost smiled. "Patterns do not convince, they remind." I watched the rings pulse, slow intake, slow release, like lungs, like a sleeping child. A part of me began to catalogue explanations. Ice crystals refracting light, high-altitude winds shaping charged particles. That part of me is honest. It has kept me alive on bad ice and worse seas. But another part, the one he had been speaking to since the car, heard a different thing, a rhythm I knew without knowing, as if I had once matched my breathing to it, and then forgotten how. "What is it?" I asked. "Proof of remembrance," he said. "Not proof for your instruments. Proof for you." "That sounds like cheating," I said, surprising myself with a small laugh that turned to steam in the air. "Convenient proof is no proof." "Oh, proof is always convenient to the one it fits," he said gently. "This fits where you are worn thin." He took a step away from me and faced north. "You carry a small ash box," he said, "in the drawer by your bed, under your socks. There is a silver letter E inside from a bracelet that was never finished." My mouth was open before I noticed it. "How?" He didn't look at me. "The object is not the point. The love you tied to it is. Patterns answer love. That is why charlatans fail and saints do not need audiences." The rings shifted, and for a moment the innermost oval became still as a mirror. The moonlight, dim and milk-pale, seemed to sit on that center like a coin on a drumhead. I felt something in my chest loosen, not a miracle, not relief, more like when a door in an old house you stop trying to open gives way because the weather changes. "You think this is for the sky," he said. "It is for you. The source remembers itself through what remembers it. Tonight that happens to be your attention." I looked down then at the ground, because the human body can only hold so much looking up. The snow at our boots was unmarked by our breath. Mine made a fog in the air. His did not. And yet the drift between us kept its sharp edge, as if the two of us were screens the wind avoided. "When you go home," he said, "you will dream of water. You will wake and think it is grief. It will be the invitation to stop managing your pain and let it carry you." I swallowed. "And if I refuse?" "You will live," he said, with no threat and no pity. "The source wastes nothing. It will circle back until you are ready to be found." The rings softened then, the ovals widening until they washed out into a more ordinary ribbon of light. The sky resumed its old business. A truck's distant rumble re-entered the world. A gust lifted crystals off the drift and flung them against my jeans. "Enough," he said, not to me, but to the moment. He turned, eyes clear as shallow water, and started back toward the car. I followed, because there was nothing else to do. Inside, I pulled the door shut and rubbed my hands to wake the sting out of them. The cabin light went dark on its own. The heater resumed its low hymn. "What did I just see?" I asked, One palm flat on the steering wheel like a man learning to stand, he settled into the seat and buckled the belt with awkward care, as if mimicking me. "You saw that the sky can answer without words. That is enough for tonight." I put the car in gear. The tires bit, and we slid gently back onto the road. In the mirror, the place where we'd stood was already being covered, snow filling our shallow marks. Above us, the green thinned to a grey no camera bothers to capture. The world looked ordinary again. I did not. For a while we drove without speaking, as if the car itself needed time to absorb what had happened outside. The heater kept its patient hum. Snow ticked softly against the windshield and then melted into small pearls that streaked away. I watched the dashed center line appear and disappear like a pulse I could measure if I dared. He was the one who returned us to words. "You have been asking who I am since the first minute," he said. "You asked with your eyes before you asked with your mouth." "I suppose I have," I said, "and you've been answering without answering." "It's the only honest way," he replied. "Anything that can be said will be too small, but it may still point." "Point, then." He angled in his seat, half facing me, half facing the window where the night copied our reflections. "Where I am from," he said, "the question, who, is not a stable container. We experience identity more like a chord than a single note. I can name the notes for you, but the chord will still be yours to hear. Try me. I am native to a world offset from yours, not by distance but by relation. You would call it a dimension, though that word is used to avoid understanding. Think of two songs played on the same instrument. They occupy the same strings, the same wood, but their patterns rarely intersect. When they do, you feel harmony or dissonance. My people learned to shape those intersections. I waited for something grand, mathematics, ships, a map of the afterlife. What came was disarmingly plain. "We learned to be quiet," he said, "quiet enough that the pattern beneath patterns would carry us." "That sounds like prayer," I said. "It is, without a recipient, until the recipient reveals itself as what you are made of. And you come here, sometimes, not often. Your world is loud. But certain nights, certain people, make a clearing." A memory lifted like a candle in my mind. My son, asleep, age 5, forehead damp with fever, his hand open on the blanket as if offering it to the room. The clearing was that hand. I drove on. "What do you call yourselves?" I asked. "We don't retain names the way you do. They are useful for commerce and warning, less useful for belonging." He paused, searching for a term that would be true enough without becoming a trick. "If you must call me something, call me else. Not because I am from elsewhere, but because I am what remains when the usual answers end." "Else," I repeated, and the word sat in the mouth like a small stone, weighty, simple, hard to swallow. "Why me else? I fix boilers. I am not a monk or a prophet. I failed at being a father, and I've been failing at being a husband ever since." "Because you are telling the truth," he said, "and not kindly or cruelly, just as one points to a mountain and says, 'There it is.' Truth is not a moral achievement. It is a condition in which the window can open." I let the accusation and the absolution pass through me. "What is your work, then? To open windows?" "To remind that there are windows," he said. "Most open themselves when they are remembered." "And our destiny?" I asked, surprised to hear the word leave me. "You said we were learning. Learning toward what?" "Toward adulthood," he said. "A species grows the way a person does, by surviving its own brilliance and its own despair. Childhood worships a god that grants wishes. Adolescence denies anything it cannot own. Adulthood learns to receive. You are between the last two." It didn't feel insulting. It felt accurate, and accuracy, delivered without contempt, has a mercy to it. "And you?" I asked. "What stage are you in?" He smiled with a fatigue I recognized. "We are a little older, old enough to know that old is not the same as wise, and that wisdom can still be frightened." I risked a glance away from the road, long enough to meet his eyes fully. They were still the color of shallow water over pale sand, and in them I saw nothing exotic, only attention, like the gaze of someone who has been entrusted with a fragile thing and intends not to drop it. "Tell me something concrete," I said, "something a man can carry into morning without sounding mad." He nodded, as if he had been waiting for the request. "Then carry this. You are not alone in the house. Your house has more rooms than you think. When you speak love without trying to win, a door opens. When you forgive without audience, a window opens. When you accept grief without decorating it with anger, the roof retracts. Light will come from above and below. If you practice this, your instruments will change to match. Your science will grow kinder. Your gods will grow quieter. Your children will not be so afraid of sleep." I held the wheel the way a man holds a rail on a heaving deck. "And you, what do you get out of this?" "Company," he said simply, "and the chance to remember through you what we forget at home." He turned his palm upward again, that empty-handed gesture I was coming to trust. The radio, still on but barely audible, drew its whisper into a fine, clear thread. The engine's vibration found the same thread and settled there like a glass tuned by a wet finger. For a second, the whole car felt less like a machine than a bowl holding water that had finally become still enough to reflect. "My name isn't a name," he repeated softly, "but if you must carry one, carry else. When you say it, remember that it names the quiet that moves when all other answers end." The road bent toward a low pass where the mountains meet like knuckles. I took the turn carefully and felt the tires hold. We were improbably still two figures in a small car traveling through a winter night. Yet the space between us had lengthened, not into distance, but into depth. "Then what comes next?" I asked. "Next," he said, "you decide whether to keep this only for yourself or to risk sounding mad for the sake of someone who needs a window." The question entered me like a seed seeking soil. I didn't answer. Not yet. The drive became long again. Long in that particular way a northern night can stretch when the mind has too much to think about. The road ahead gleamed like a strip of frozen metal, catching whatever faint light the moon could spare. I was running out of fuel, and that small, practical concern became an anchor, something ordinary to hold on to. "There's a station about 40 kilometers ahead," I said, mostly to hear my own voice. Else nodded, though he didn't look at me. 42, he corrected gently. I smiled despite myself. "I'll take your word for it." I focused on the gauges, on the rhythm of the tires, anything to stop the new and impossible from crowding in. My hands ached from gripping the steering wheel too tightly. The heater's breath came in waves, too hot, then too cold, and every small sound inside the car began to feel magnified, intimate, as though the world had shrunk to this moving cocoon of steel, breath, and thought. Finally, I asked what I'd been circling for an hour. "How do I know you're real?" He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was patient. "Real to which part of you?" "To the part that has to live here," I said. "The part that will wake up tomorrow and try to tell himself he wasn't hallucinating." "You've seen the snow," he said. "You've seen the sky remember itself." "I've also seen grief make men see what they need," I said. "I fixed boilers in hospitals. I watched dying people talk to the dead and call it comfort. Then call this comfort," he said. "If it warms what was cold, use it." I wanted to be angry at that, at how easily he sidestepped logic, but anger takes energy, and mine was leaking out somewhere I couldn't plug. You're saying it doesn't matter whether you're real or not. I'm saying your definition of real is smaller than what keeps you breathing. The dashboard light flickered. For a moment, every needle dropped to zero, fuel, temperature, speed, and then sprang back. The headlights dimmed to the color of candle flame and brightened again. I slowed instinctively, scanning the road for faults. The engine never faltered. "Electrical short," I said. "Perhaps," he said. "You did that." He looked at his own hands as though genuinely checking. "No, you did. When you ask for proof, the pattern responds. It uses what's near." "I don't understand." He turned toward me. "Your world is a mirror with slow silver. Sometimes it shows what you believe. Sometimes it shows what you need to see in order to believe." The words irritated me because they were evasive and because they were beautiful. "So I made the car flicker? You and what listens?" I didn't answer. My throat was dry. We drove another kilometer in silence before the wipers began to slow, the rhythm stretching unnaturally. Then they stopped, mid-sweep. The motor hummed, but the blades were frozen halfway up the windshield. Outside, the snow fell thicker now, a million soft needles sliding against the glass. I reached for the switch. It was already on. I tapped it. Nothing. I cursed quietly under my breath, shifted to neutral, and leaned forward, ready to bang the plastic housing with my fist. Old mechanic's reflex. Else reached out, gently taking my wrist before it fell. His hand was warm. Not human warm. Different. Like standing near a stove, but not in front of it. A heat without direction. "Watch," he said. I did. Slowly, the blades began to move, not jerking to life, but gliding as if remembering what they were built for. They swept the snow in perfect arcs, then rested. The motor hadn't restarted. There was no sound. I looked down. The key was no longer in the ignition. My heart climbed my ribs. I checked the floor, the dash, my pockets. Empty. I was certain I hadn't removed it. Else opened his hand. The key lay there unmoving, as if it had been waiting the whole time. He offered it to me without ceremony. I didn't take it immediately. I only stared. The metal caught the light and seemed to hum, though maybe it was just my pulse. "How did you—" He shook his head. "Not how. Why? You needed a small proof. Larger ones break people." I took the key, fingers trembling. It was cold. Real. I turned it between my thumb and forefinger, expecting a trick magnet, a slot, some sleight of hand. But it was only my key, my world's key. "I'm not crazy," I said quietly, testing the sentence. "No," he said. "You're awake." I slid the key back into the ignition. It fit perfectly. The engine kept running, steady as before. Everything, the lights, the heater, the hum, settled back into the rhythm of an ordinary car, moving through an extraordinary night. After a while, I said, "When I tell people this, if I ever do, they'll think it's grief. They'll say I wanted meaning so badly, I built you." "Then let them," he said. "Meaning built you long before you named it." I felt the weight of the key in my palm and closed my fist around it. "You talk like a priest," he smiled faintly. "A good priest listens for the quiet. A bad one demands that others hear his noise. Which am I to you?" I looked ahead. The green of the aurora had thinned into a long, ghostly ribbon, pale as breath. "I don't know yet." "That's all right," he said. Knowing would end the lesson. We reached the fuel station, exactly 42 kilometers later. It was closed, but the pump light glowed gold against the snow, and somehow my tank was still half full. The station sat alone like a lantern left on a porch, the kind of place where no one is ever exactly on duty, and yet you never feel unwatched. A yellow cone of light threw our shadows long across the ice. The pump was the old kind with a squeaky handle and a cracked screen that guessed more than it measured. A handwritten sign inside the window said, "Self-service, card only, no one inside, no footprints out back, just the steady flakefall of a night that doesn't expect visitors." I topped up the tank out of habit. It clicked off before full and told me a number that couldn't be right. I didn't argue. I needed the ritual more than the fuel. Else stood a few meters away with his face upturned, eyes half closed, as if measuring the sky with hearing. When we were back in the car, I asked the question that had grown heavy in me since the road began. "Why did you come?" He sat with his hands folded, thumbs resting together like a closed book. "Because a choice is coming," he said. "And because choices made in one room travel through the house." "I need more than a proverb," I said. "You will have it." He motioned toward the windshield. "Your world is entering a season we remember. Saturation. Too much signal, not enough song. Too much proof, not enough recognition. In such seasons, the walls between rooms thin. The loud ones mistake that for conquest. The quiet ones may learn to listen. Which you become will shape what travels outward." "You mean shape you," I said. "Yes," he said simply. "Our rooms touch." He let the words rest there without drama. He wasn't warning me of apocalypse. He wasn't recruiting me for a temple. He was describing plumbing, the way pressure in one pipe rattles the other, even if they belong to different floors. "We survived our saturation with luck and loss," he went on. "We broke our instruments and nearly broke ourselves. Afterward, we devoted a long season to visiting younger rooms at the edges of that same weather. We went not to steer, but to steady. Sometimes all a structure needs is a hand on the beam while the wind tests it." "And I'm a beam?" I said, surprised by a fleck of humor in my voice. He gave a small nod. "A tired one, but true." I thought of the way I had moved through the last 2 years, stiff with the kind of honesty that keeps pain organized. I had worked, paid, carried, repaired. I had not sung. I had barely spoken. A beam, yes, true and unlistened to. "Why me and not a minister or a president or someone with a microphone?" I asked. "Because microphones feed the room that is already loud," he said. "And because grief teaches the kind of strength that doesn't throw its weight around. Tonight, I needed a witness who would not turn the sky into a slogan." The word witness made a quiet place in me. Not leader, not chosen, just present enough to carry something without reshaping it to fit my name. "Is that the only reason?" I asked. The question came out smaller than I intended. "No," he said, "there is also company." He glanced at me with an expression so human it almost hurt. "We grow lonely where I am from. Not for people. We have each other. For the friction of forgetting. You remind me what it costs to remember." He turned his palm upward, and I saw the tiny white scars along the heel of his hand, like the memory of old tools. For a moment, I wondered if those marks had crossed rooms with him, or if my mind had given them to him to make him bearable. "You're telling me my private life matters to a world that can step between dimensions," I said. "That sounds like the kind of story people invent to feel important." "It's the opposite," he said. "Importance is a loud word. I'm saying intimacy shapes the house. The way you forgive your wife in the kitchen when no one hears. The way you stop bargaining with your son's absence and let love be love without an object. These are not small events. They are load-bearing." The heater thudded once and settled. Outside, a plow roared past and threw a glitter of ice over the hood. The world continued its business, indifferent and exact. "When is this choice?" I asked. "If we're on a schedule, I'd like to know the clock." He shook his head. "Human clocks are poor for this. Think not of dates, but of posture. Saturation teaches you to hunch around your name. The choice is to uncurl. Some will do it only when something breaks. You may not need to wait. And if we choose wrong, I said. There is no wrong that is final, he said, and the relief those words brought surprised me. Only detours that cost more mercy. I turned the key, though the engine was already running, a reflex to reassure myself the world still required hands for small things. We pulled onto the road. For a while we listened to the tires and the hiss and the soft breath of the vents like animals sleeping. When you leave, I said at last, what will I have besides a strange night and a key that disappeared? A practice, he said, and an errand. The first word I understood. The second made me tense. What errand? To tell one person, he said. Not a congregation, not a crowd. One person who trusts you more than they trust the sky. Tell them not the tricks or the distances or the rings. Tell them the sentence that changed your breathing. You will know which one it is by the way it embarrasses and relieves you at once. I waited for an argument to rise in me and found none. Perhaps I was tired of being purely private. Perhaps I had already begun. And you? I asked. Why tonight? Specifically, tonight? He watched the road and answered with a clarity that made the cabin feel bright. Because you were about to decide that love had ended with a body, I came to interrupt that decision. I gripped the wheel until my fingers prickled. The sentence embarrassed and relieved me at once. He nodded, as if he'd felt the shift. Good, he said. Now we are near the place where we must stop. Stop? I glanced at the fuel gauge, the clock, the map in my head. There was nothing ahead for kilometers but snow and rock and the slow turn of the fjord. Yes, he said, where the rooms touch a little more. The road began to climb, weaving between rock faces that leaned close enough to scrape the mirrors if I strayed an inch. The sky ahead had cleared to a strange, luminous grey, neither night nor morning. The snow had stopped falling, but the air glittered with leftover crystals suspended in their own patience. Else sat very still, his hands folded in his lap, like a man listening for instructions too quiet for the rest of us to hear. We're close, he said. To what? I asked, though I already sensed it. The air itself had changed. My ears felt pressurized, the way they do before a storm. To the place where your world and mine remember their neighbors. The car crested a low ridge, and the land opened into a wide basin I'd never noticed on any map. It wasn't dramatic, no pillars of light, no perfect symmetry, just a hollow in the earth where the snow lay thinner, as though heat rose from below. In the center was a frozen pond, its surface black and smooth as obsidian. Around it, the wind had drawn a circle of bare ground. "Stop here," he said. I turned off the engine. The sudden silence pressed against my skull. When I opened the door, the air had a texture, dense, humming, neither cold nor warm. The aurora hung above us like faint handwriting. Else stepped onto the frozen surface and looked back. "This is one of the old thresholds," he said. "There are a few on every world that learns to listen. They appear where attention has grown thin, but love remains." I followed him. The ice held, solid, though I could see no cracks, no trapped bubbles, only a faint light beneath, like a candle under glass. "What happens here?" I asked. "Nothing that can be shown," he said, "only what can be remembered." He knelt and placed his palm flat on the ice. I did the same, awkwardly, uncertain what ritual I was committing to. The surface was warm. A faint vibration pulsed through it, steady, patient, like a faraway engine or a heartbeat slowed for eternity. "Do you feel it?" he asked. "Yes," I whispered. "It is not from below," he said. "It is from within. Your planet breathes. Every living world does. That rhythm is the same pulse that moves in you. When you listen together, the boundary between you softens. That is what we call the rooms touching. The vibration deepened until it wasn't just under my hand but inside my ribs, syncing with my heartbeat. My breath slowed without my consent. My body was answering something older than fear. "Why bring me here?" I asked. "Because here you can see without seeing," he said. "You can meet what you've been calling God without turning it into a face." The pond's light swelled, faint but certain. Shapes began to shimmer below the ice, not forms, but motion, like heat rising. It wasn't frightening. It was intimate, like standing inside a thought that has just remembered your name. I felt tears gathering without sadness behind them. Els spoke softly, the words almost lost to the hum. Every being asks the same question in its own language. Am I alone in this light? The answer is always no, but the answer cannot be given. It must be recognized. You are recognizing it now. I wanted to ask if what I was feeling was him, or the source, or my own wish to believe, but the question dissolved before I could find the words. All that remained was the pulse, the shared rhythm between my chest and the world beneath it. Then he said something that broke me open. "Your son never left the room." I turned sharply toward him. Don't do that," I said, though the anger was already losing its teeth. "I am not doing," he said. "I am reminding. The rooms touch here, remember? You thought the distance between bodies was the distance between souls. It is not. You and he are waves in the same field. When one stills, the other carries its shape." For a moment the air thickened. I saw, not with my eyes, but the way you see music, a figure of light at the edge of the pond, small, familiar. He didn't move, didn't speak, and yet the air around him felt like the memory of laughter. Then the image folded back into the glow beneath the ice, and the pond was only a pond again. I covered my face with my hands. The warmth from the ice reached my fingertips, else waited, silent. When I could speak, I said, "If I tell people what I just saw, they'll call it grief." "Then call it that," he said. "Names don't matter. What matters is that you no longer think death is a locked door." He stood and offered me his hand. I took it. His skin felt ordinary now, rough, dry, even cold. Whatever had filled the air was retreating, leaving behind only the whisper of wind over snow. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you remember," he said. "And when you forget again, which you will, remember that forgetting is also part of the song." The hum faded until all I could hear was my own pulse, ordinary again. The ice beneath us looked dull, unlit. The threshold had closed. We walked back to the car. The engine started on the first turn. The heater breathed warm air into our faces. I looked back once. The basin was already disappearing into a curtain of snow, as if the world were quietly erasing its handwriting. Els said, "When you wake tomorrow, you'll think it was a dream. Let it be one. Dreams are doors, too." I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. The last kilometers passed like a slow exhale. By the time I turned off the highway and followed the narrow lane down to our house, the aurora had thinned to a grey bruise over the mountains. The porch light, on a timer I keep forgetting to reset, threw its weak cone across the steps and the drift I should have shoveled yesterday. I parked, cut the engine, and sat with my hands still on the wheel, waiting for the night to tell me what it had been. Els didn't move. For a moment I wondered if he had fallen asleep, if beings like him ever did. Then he said, "You will forget pieces. That is not failure. It is the way your world digests light." "You're not coming in," I said. "No." He turned his head to me, and the shallows of his eyes were almost warm. "Your house is where the next window opens." I wanted to ask, "When will I see you again?" But the question felt like grasping at a coat already on someone else's shoulders. Instead, I said, "The errand? One person, he reminded me. Tell them the sentence that embarrassed and relieved you at once. I nodded. He placed his hand lightly on the dashboard. The radio woke into a thin, clean tone. No station, no music, just the thread I had learned to recognize. It faded like a breath blown across a bottle. When I looked back to him, the passenger seat was empty. No door click, no cold air, only absence. And in the absence, the barest scent of snow. I went inside. The mudroom smelled of wool and salt. I kicked off my boots, set them neatly, the kind of order that has replaced prayer for me, and listened. The house held its usual sounds, the old fridge's intermittent groan, the baseboard heaters ticking as they expand, the faint scrape of a branch against the bedroom window. My wife was asleep. A small mercy. Or a small cowardice, depending on which room you judge from. I washed my hands at the kitchen sink, watching the dark window return my face. 58. Lines carved by honest work and dishonest silence. When I turned off the tap, the house felt larger, as if a wall had slid a few centimeters somewhere I couldn't see. In the bedroom, Eva lay on her side, mouth slightly open, a shallow snore just audible. I stood in the doorway and waited for some sign. A light moving under the door, a voice, anything. Nothing came. So I did the ordinary instead. I changed into an old t-shirt, brushed my teeth, and opened the top drawer of the nightstand for the little jar of balm I use in winter. The ash box was on top of the socks. I hadn't put it there. I keep it buried under the wool pair at the back, because that's where men store unspent prayers. The sight of it, plain, dark, unremarkable, pulled the night through me like a wire. I lifted the lid. The silver letter E lay in its felt like a moon sliver. Not a new miracle, not even a trick, only a thing I had hidden from myself, now sitting where a man would have to choose to ignore it. I sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped, and Eva breathed a little deeper and then settled. My hands were shaking. I closed the box and set it on the nightstand, facing me like an instrument waiting to be tuned. "Are you all right?" she murmured without opening her eyes. I could have said yes. I could have swallowed the night and let it calcify into a story I only tell myself during bad weather. Instead, the errand knocked. "I have to tell you something," I said. My voice sounded too loud in the soft room. She rolled onto her back, blinked up at me and pushed hair from her face. "What is it?" The sentence rose with shame and relief in the same breath. Love didn't end with his body. Her eyes filled before she seemed to understand the words. She reached for my wrist and held it like it might float away. I told her the least sensational version I could. No rings in the sky, no keys appearing in hands, no pond that pulsed like a slow heart. I told her about the quiet that moves, the tone beneath the noise, the way the rooms of the house touch. I said I had been about to decide that love was over, and something interrupted me. She listened. Once she laughed softly at my clumsy metaphors. Twice she wiped her cheeks with the heel of her palm like a child. When I finished, she lay there breathing with the careful attention of someone measuring pain. "How do you know you didn't make it?" she asked finally. Not accusing. Tender and practical, the way she asks about a leak in the roof. "I don't," I said, but something small asked to be believed, and it was merciful enough to fit inside our house. "The box," she said, looking at the nightstand. "The box," I agreed. We didn't speak for a long time. The heater ticked. A gust threw snow against the window, a sound like sand on a drumhead. Somewhere deep in the silence, I felt the thread, the radio's thin tone without the radio, stretch between us and hold. Not loud, not dramatic, just present enough to carry. Eva squeezed my wrist. "I want to try," she said. "To do what?" "To doubt my doubt," she whispered, and her voice broke, just long enough to hear. We slept. I dreamt of water that wasn't water, a dark pond lit from within, and the sensation of a small hand open on a blanket. In the dream, I did not cry. In the dream, I breathed. In the grey hour before waking, a single sound moved through the house, so soft I thought I imagined it. The wiper blades making one slow, perfect sweep across a windshield that wasn't running. When morning came, the car in the drive wore a clean crescent on the glass, as if someone had drawn a breath there and let it clear a path. Not a spectacle, a signature. The kind you only recognize if you were there when the name was spoken. It's been 3 winters since that night. I mark time differently now, not by dates or holidays, but by the way the light changes when it hits the mountains, by the silence between snowfalls. I still fix boilers, mend roofs, shovel the drive. People still call me practical, and they're not wrong. But there's another current under the ordinary, like a river moving below the ice. I hear it sometimes when I'm working alone, the steady hum that isn't mechanical at all. I've never seen Elsa again. I've stopped expecting to. Some nights, when the northern lights are strong enough to cast color on the snow, I go outside and stand on the porch. I keep my hands at my sides and look up, not to summon, just to listen. The sky no longer feels empty. It feels busy, the way a forest is busy even when no leaves move. People who know me say I've changed. They think grief has mellowed me. Maybe that's true. I don't correct them. I've learned that telling a story too directly can kill it. The truth needs air around it, like embers need darkness to show their glow. Eva knows, though. She never asks if Elsa was real. Some mornings, over coffee, she'll glance toward the window and say, "He's still keeping an eye on us, isn't he?" And I'll nod. We've made peace with not needing proof. It's strange how marriage becomes easier once you stop trying to win the argument about what's real. The ashbox stays on the nightstand now. I don't hide it anymore. Sometimes I open it, touch the silver letter E, and feel nothing unusual. No heat, no hum, no vision. Just a small, cold piece of metal. But every time I close the lid, the room feels wider, like the house is taking a deep breath. I've started to understand what else meant. Your house has more rooms than you think. I found one of those rooms the day I helped a neighbor repair a frozen pipe. He'd lost his wife that autumn and spoke to me the way men speak when they want to say everything but don't know how. I told him a story, not the whole one, just enough. I said, "Love doesn't end with the body." He looked at me for a long time, and I could see the sentence settling into him, embarrassed and relieved at once. He didn't say thank you, but when we finished, he handed me an apple from his cellar, polished it on his sleeve and said, "Take this. It's sweet for winter." That was the errand, completed without ceremony. The proof has become smaller over time, and that's how I know it's real. Once it was a key vanishing from a car. Now it's the way a sparrow lands on the railing just as I think of my boy, or the way the wipers start themselves for one slow sweep on a clear windshield. It's the way silence answers when I ask nothing. I've stopped praying the old way. I don't ask, don't beg, don't list. I listen. Sometimes when I'm sanding a beam or tightening a valve, I catch myself humming a tone that has no melody. It's not beautiful, but it steadies me. I think that's what Elsie meant when he said we were learning to receive. Faith, it turns out, is not a candle you guard. It's the air that lets the flame exist at all. A journalist once asked to interview me after hearing rumors of a strange man seen on the Alta Road. I told him he must be mistaken. Let the world keep its categories. They keep the house balanced. I don't need anyone to build a shrine around my night. The shrine is already everywhere, disguised as ordinary life. Sometimes I imagine Elsa somewhere beyond whatever word we use for distance, sitting with others like him, listening for our tone. Maybe he tells my story the way I tell his, knowing it will sound like fiction to those who haven't touched the quiet yet. Maybe that's the point. If you ask what I believe now, I'll tell you this. We are never alone in the room. We never were. The light we call God or the source or whatever name helps us breathe, it isn't above us or beyond us or hidden behind clouds of theology. It's the pulse we share when we stop pretending the walls are solid. I don't know if I'll see Else again in this lifetime. But if I do, I'll thank him, not for miracles, but for interruption. For reminding me that grief can become a door. For teaching me to doubt my doubt long enough to hear. When the wind slides through the birches and makes the world sound like water, I close my eyes and whisper the only prayer I have left, the quiet that moves. Thank you for moving through me.